Hi, I'm Sarah.
And I'm Rena, and welcome to
Biopic, a podcast story. This is a podcast where we dissect the good, bad, ugly, and absurd of this specific genre of motion picture, the biopic. If you want to learn more about us, our scoring system, and how we choose movies, please check out our special introductory episode, Introduction, Who Are We and What Are We Doing?
Sarah, what movie are we doing this week?
This week, we will be talking about Battle of the Sexes. And Rena, can you give us the trigger warning?
This movie contains depictions of misogyny, homophobia, anti-egalitarianism, white male frailty, gambling, gaslighting, unequal pay for equal work, 70s fashion, addiction, the old boy club, 12-step meetings, ideological belligerence, male chauvinism, haircuts, glasses that fail to steam up during intense physical exertion, adultery, and cigarettes. Sarah, can you think of anything I left out?
I sure can't.
Also, tennis. This movie contains tennis.
It does. Rena, can you give us the spoiler warning?
Spoiler warning. We are going to spoil everything, including possibly the major plot points in works of narrative art having nothing to do with this particular movie. Consider yourself warned.
Sources used in this episode include All In, an autobiography by Billie Jean King, the Trashy Divorces podcast, the WTF with Mark Maron podcast interview with Billie Jean King, and coverage of this film from Slate.com.
Sarah, can you please tell us a little bit about Billie Jean King and the 2017 movie Battle of the Sexes?
I'd be happy to. So about Billie Jean King from our friends at Wikipedia. Billie Jean King is an American former world #1 tennis player. She won 39 Grand Slam titles, 12 in singles, 16 in women's doubles, and 11 in mixed doubles. She was a member of the victorious United States team in 7 Federation Cups and 9 Whiteman Cups. King was the founder of the Women's Tennis Association and the Women's Sports Foundation. She was instrumental in persuading cigarette brand Virginia Slims to sponsor women's tennis in the 1970s and went on to serve on the board of their parent company, Philip Morris, in the 2000s, a job that she did step down from after complaints from fans. King was inducted into the International Tennis Hall of Fame in 1987. In 2006, the USTA National Tennis Center in New York City was renamed the USTA Billie Jean King National Tennis Center. In 2020, the Federation Cup was renamed the Billie Jean King Cup in her honor. In 2022, she was awarded the French Legion of Honor, and in 2024, she received a Congressional Gold Medal. This is just a summary of some of the honors she has received. There were so many more. Also, in 2023, King competed in season 10 of The Masked Singer as Royal Hen. She was the first of Group B to be eliminated on the episode A Celebration of Elton John.
Yes, Sarah, could you please tell us about the 2017 movie Battle of the Sexes?
Of course. Battle of the Sexes is a 2017 sports comedy drama film directed by Valerie Faris and Jonathan Dayton and written by Simon Beaufoy. The plot is loosely based on the 1973 tennis match between Billie Jean King and Bobby Riggs. Despite receiving very positive reviews, the picture performed poorly at the box office, grossing $18.6 million against a $25 million budget.
I think that this may have had something to do with the film's target audience being demoralized by the results of the 2016 election.
Those were tough times. Thank God that's over.
Oh, yeah. So I know nothing about tennis. I watched a match between Margaret Court and Billie Jean King from 1972, and I found myself wondering things like, so is it good to hit the ball or bad to hit the ball? Or is the point to hit the ball in such a way that your opponent cannot hit it back to you? Or are you supposed to make an honest effort to return the ball to them? Do you lose or gain points? What is love? What is love?
Baby, don't hurt
me. me. Don't hurt me no more.
What is love? Do you know the scoring system of tennis? Are you familiar with that? Because that would blow your mind.
What is the scoring system for tennis, Sarah? I can't believe you actually know this because I do not.
I have in my day played a bit of tennis. I'm not going to tell you I was good at it, but I have played. Basically, it's so you start with love. Love is 0. Your first point is 15. Your second point is 30. Your third point is 40. And then you can win the match at 45, which would be the next one, as long as the person who you are playing against is 2 of those units behind you. Otherwise, you go into deuce. And then when you go into deuce, it's like a sudden death situation. Yeah. And you do that over and over and over and over again. I think you play 6 rounds to make a set. And then you win by sets.
I'm confused.
Oh, it's a wild ride of scoring, and I didn't familiarize myself, as I don't familiarize myself with much before we record. But yeah, it's wild.
I found the Ptolemaic family tree in the Cleopatra episode vastly less confusing than the scoring system for tennis that you just told me about.
Tennis is like the American measurement system of sports scoring.
So it would seem to me that this scoring system is well adapted to Americans because we prefer sports where the numbers get big, like that you score, 7 or 8 for a touchdown in American football. And I think the thing that drives us nuts about soccer is that the scores are so low. Like, we want to see lots of numbers. Basketball has big numbers. This would seem well adapted to how Americans like big numbers, but still very confusing.
It's very confusing. The other problem is that tennis, it only goes up to 45. Like, you're not getting higher than 45. Baseball's scoring system is higher than soccer, but lower than football. So you get more points than you would get in soccer. I think we have proven in our sports episodes that you and I are uniquely qualified to talk about professional athletics.
You've come a long way, baby.
Indeed. I would play a sport that was sponsored by cigarettes.
That's amazing.
Yeah, like that aspect of this movie, I was like, you know what? I love the 70s, man.
This movie was quite modified for dramatic purposes. They kind of blur together things that were happening to Billie Jean King over the course of the early 70s together into 1972, 1973 for story flow. So Billie Jean King wrote in her memoir, a subplot of the film dealt with my relationship with Marilyn Barnett. Though the filmmakers took some dramatic license, it was entertainment, not a documentary. I think the movie sent an empowering message. And she noted that Emma Stone was the same age she was when she played Bobby Riggs.
Yes, and Steve Carrell was just about the same age as Bobby Riggs when he played Bobby Riggs.
Steve Carrell is such a likable actor, and he does make the character likably irascible. There's the sense that Carrell's character is at best an edgelord, at worst a troll, and Bill Pullman's character is just evil.
I definitely found myself reflecting back on on the notion of kayfabe and Ty Cobb, and thinking like, I don't believe that Bobby Riggs believes this. I think that he is playing a character and ginning up excitement. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know what is in Bobby Riggs's heart, but the way that Carrell played it, I felt like it was him engaging in sort of like that sport theater.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Pullman's a true believer that women suck in this movie. But Steve Carrell, felt like I felt like Bobby Riggs was kind of doing it because he liked the attention and also saw an opportunity to be part of the narrative again, even if it was playing the heel who was showing that women could be good at sports.
There were moments where I started to wonder if I saw Michael Scott leaking through just a little bit, but I think that was me. We open on shots of Billie Jean playing tennis to become 1972 champion. There is a newscaster voice talking about her achievements, which have made her the most successful woman player of all time. She gets a congratulatory call from President Richard Nixon at his most human. In the meantime, retired champion, currently making nothing on the senior circuit, Bobby Riggs is sitting in his boring office, looking out the window, feeling dissatisfied with life.
Billie Jean King is truly ascendant, and she wants her and her colleagues in tennis to receive equal pay. Bobby Riggs was truly a very, very good tennis player. His play style was very similar to the way he lived. He was scrappy AF. He was smaller than the other players, but he was feisty and he was a hustler on the court. He was, deceptively powerful, and a very good player. That is Bobby Riggs, and he looks pretty unhappy to be out of the game.
His wife says he has a gambling problem. He would disagree. And I'm not sure just how good or bad of a gambler was Bobby Riggs, because Carrell almost makes you see it from Bobby Riggs's perspective.
He was a pretty outstanding gambler from what I read. He was pretty darn good at gambling.
There's a scene where he just can't help himself with it. He's sitting around the dinner table with his wife, and she's trying to make him feel useful at the job where it's clearly just his father-in-law employing him, where his son and he start to gamble on how many peppercorns are in the pepper grinder.
He is happy to take any bet that comes his way.
His wife Priscilla is played by Elizabeth Shue, and I'm just imagining her thinking that she doesn't want to deal with cleaning up all the peppercorns.
I was really excited to see Elizabeth Shue.
She's a bombshell in this. In the 70s, like, they get the glam of it. They also get the stuff that hasn't aged very well, but where you feel like the people wearing it think they look good. And one thing I noticed was that the glasses that Bobby Riggs and Billie Jean King both wore, when you see the photos at the end, I don't know if they found them in dead stock or built them from scratch, but it's an exact matchup.
And we see Billie Jean at a gala event with her husband, who is he's like a Ken doll.
Yeah, her husband is gorgeous.
I don't know if that is the hair color that God gave him, but the color of his hair often looks like Freddie Prinze Jr.'s in those Scooby-Doo movies. It's sort of yellow.
There are men who have hair that color. There are women who have hair color that color. There is a yellow blonde can happen in nature.
As a veteran of many a blonde dye job, I was dubious of the naturalness of this hair color, but I digress.
It could be the lighting that makes it that like butter, because they do use a lot of the lighting they use looks very close to films from that era that made things a little brighter.
I would say that her hair, primarily at no point in this movie or at any point in that decade, was really the kind of classic hairstyle that translates into our modern times, is how I will put it.
There are pictures of her where she has this terrible perm, and I'm like, why would you put these into the illustrations section of your autobiography? I know you're proud of whatever honor you were getting. If you listen to the Marilyn podcast, she's also quite open about that she struggled with eating disorders. She had to go to rehabilitation for eating disorders at one point. I think the visual composition in this film is gorgeous. There's this one scene where Marilyn is standing on a balcony and you see all the balconies above her in a wave. I think the shots are really good in this.
They managed to use the construction style of the time, which was like semi-brutalist, like sort of like slightly more colorful Soviet bloc kind of hotels and things like that, and they make it look very beautiful.
I think maybe what they were trying to do is make it look to us the way that it looked to people at the time. So as Billie Jean and Larry are dancing, Sarah Silverman as Billie Jean King's manager Gladys, who is a real woman and a real badass from what I've read, comes in, and they find out that the upcoming tournaments are going to be giving the men 8 times the award money. And I looked it up, and this had actually gotten worse over the years, women gradually getting less. So the timeline has been tinkered with, as I said, because, again, in the name of storytelling, because the Virginia Slims Tour actually launched in 1970, 2 years before this. You have a sense in the film of where there's momentum, where it's all happening inside a year, and that is not the case. But so Gladys and Billie Jean go upstairs to meet Bill Pullman and another guy from the Lawn Tennis Association, and they are super patronizing with them, and I want to smack their smug little mouths. And I love Sarah Silverman in this so much, and I love Gladys, and I love how she's kind of working a Sontag streak with her hair. The character that Bill Pullman is playing, Jack, his rationale includes the men have families to support.
I wanted to jump through the screen and strangle him when he said that. You know what? It's not your business what they do with the money. Give them the same amount of money.
Yeah.
So they leave this conversation, and it's unpleasant. And we cut back to Bobby. He sneaks out at night so he can go to his country club and gamble. Like,
before this, Gladys and Billie Jean do an absolute power move where he's been telling them all these demeaning things like, the men are more exciting, the men are faster, and the guy next to him is like, fact. And then they're like, we're out of here, fact. And he thinks they're bluffing. Like, he constantly thinks they're bluffing, and he never changes.
Nice girls wouldn't step away. They just take whatever they can get because they're women.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, so tired. Bobby loves to gamble, and he's doing, I guess, as his like, look, you can beat me thing. He has 2 dogs tied to himself while playing Jack, Bill Pullman. Bobby wins a Rolls Royce from Jack, which he then has to hide from his wife because he's not supposed to be gambling anymore.
And so Gladys and Billie Jean decide they're going to launch the WTA, the women's tour. They have no money, so the girls have to share rooms, as we find out.
We see them having this first press conference, these first photos where they each have $1 that they're holding up. And Gladys says she'll get them this sponsor soon. We meet Marilyn Barnett, played by Andrea Riseborough. The real Marilyn is very problematic, and Andrea Riseborough makes me think of mass-produced vanilla pudding where there's lots of chemicals in it, and there's a little swirl that's supposed to be butterscotch but tastes nothing like butterscotch.
I was once in an Ann Taylor, and the woman behind the counter said, "Oh, you look like the girl on Black Mirror who got punked out by the guinea pig." I, for the record, do not look like Andrea Riseborough. She's fine. This is a character where, like, Marilyn in this doesn't have a lot to do.
I mean, I'm shocked to see a movie about lesbians where the female love interest is the girl. And then I realized we dealt with that all the way back in episode 7, Bessie, where I just thought of the girlfriend's name as Girlfriend and had to go on IMDb to find out that her name was Lucille.
Yeah, she's very much the girl. I mean, there's not really a call for her to be more of a character in this. She's kind of like this sort of saintly, like lesbian who does Billie Jean's hair and kind of takes her over the rainbow into Oz. She gets like a very slight shag haircut from Andrea Riseborough, and then all the women get kicked out of the Lawn Tennis Association because they're joining this other league.
You get Bill Pullman, all he does is like threaten and try to knock them into line, and He probably could have gotten away with like half pay and they would have seen it as progress. But
Yeah, he had to go all the way to 1/8.
yeah, and then say that he was going to kick them out. And I love where she says to him, your grand slams without the world's best women players? Not so grand, Jack. And just that she never loses confidence. He never spooks her. She calls his bluff again and again.
I mean, Billie Jean King is a straight badass.
She is, and she is such a badass in this movie, too. And she writes in her book about how, as a child, not liking how things were and thinking, I have to be the best in the world so I can change things. And how many people think that, and it just doesn't pan out?
She works incredibly hard, and we also do see, and I think this is Steve Carell's likability is only matched by Emma Stone's likability. And we see that Billie Jean King is not the most pleasant human to be around in a lot of cases. Like, she's a very focused, kind of ice cold killer of a player. But because Emma Stone is so likable, I'm like, oh, that's okay. That's okay that she's like this.
Emma Stone is pretty. It's another case of the phenomena in biopics that I call U 2.0, where whoever they hire to play you is better looking. Emma Stone is prettier than Billie Jean, but she gets the physicality down, the way she's holding her face. She put on like 20 pounds of muscle for the role. She gets the walk down too. And when I listened to how Billie Jean King speaks on Marin's podcast, I think she got the vocal tone down as well. So they're all sitting in the diner and Gladys has a surprise for them.
Virginia Slims is going to sponsor our tournament. Here's the thing. In the 70s and part of the 80s, you could be an athlete and engage in the most abhorrent personal lifestyle choices. Like, you could be a smoker. Like, everyone on the 86 Mets was like so high on cocaine the entire time. Everyone was doing chewing tobacco. You could be out of shape and playing a professional sport in the 70s and 80s. It was a different America. Some say a better America.
But funny, whenever they're talking about bringing that America back, it's still never okay to smoke again.
That's kind of the problem with the whole Make America Great Again, because if you could make America truly great again, I could smoke anywhere.
If they were actually able to make America great again, smoking wouldn't cause cancer. I'd be able to not just start again, but accessorize it elegantly, because of course it makes sense to buy this sterling silver lighter and cigarette case because I'm making a lifetime investment here.
I could have that bowl of cigarettes on my table. I could just be sitting there at my job in my Dion von Furstenberg wrap dress, smoking.
And it would not give you lines on your face in advance.
But yeah, they're making America great again in all the wrong ways.
The sponsor that Gladys has found for them is Virginia Slims. And I used to love the Virginia Slims ads in the backs of magazines when I was a kid, where it would say, you've come a long way, baby. And it would be like, this is a cigarette just for women. It's skinny, it's long, it's elegant, and smoking it means you are independent and your own kind of thinker. The Virginia Slims ad campaign was all about, like, it used to be so bad for women, but now we're independent. And here's this picture of this woman dressed for the 1890s smoking a cigarette because she's so ahead of her time. And you've come a long way, baby. Their reputation was all about women independently making a choice to give themselves cancer. I love that there's no condemnation from the movie toward Gladys of her taking a cigarette company as a sponsor, because that would imply that women have to be morally purer than men. And she got them a sponsor pretty quickly and from a big company, and it was a tough sell. So go Gladys.
You know, everybody smoked in the 70s. It's fine.
I don't think any of them smoke because one of them starts to and then coughs, because they're athletes.
They also get their own fashion designer. And get to wear colors instead of just tennis whites. And who should their fashion designer be but Alan Cumming? And oh boy, was I delighted to see him, as I always am.
I love Alan Cumming. He's always so fun to have in things.
And he is a very talented actor. on top of that. And then there's a guy who is his partner in design and life, who is in every Law and Order and is a guest star in everything. And then we see the ladies doing press and doing interviews, and Dr. Spaceman is there to interview them.
I don't know this reference. Sarah, can you explain?
From 30 Rock. Chris Parnell. He played Dr. Spaceman or Dr. Spaceman on 30 Rock. The other actor who is in everything, who I should properly name because he's a good actor, is Wallace Langham. And this was where I realized my primary issue with this film, which I largely found delightful and like really fascinating and well performed, is that it's too damn long.
Didn't mind that. I felt like it was over very quickly, and I enjoyed pretty much all of it.
I felt like the front end of the movie took a little bit too long to get to where it needed to be for the primary course of action. That said, I don't begrudge all of that pipeline because I think it did need to be there. I think we needed that runway. I just think they could have, trimmed that up a bit in order to take off like 15 minutes.
I mean, I could have done without Marilyn because the character is so uninteresting. I don't know what the hell they were going to do with that. I understand from the autobiography, Marilyn wasn't all bad. The early times with her were lovely, apparently, but just knowing what we know about where that went, like the scenes where they're like, who are you to each other? I don't care who Marilyn is. The things that felt like they were taking a while at the front end with the setup, they were truncating several years of action into one just to get it to go faster. Because they couldn't say, this happened in 1970. They couldn't go into all the details. So they're already contracting.
They could have cut like 10 minutes of reaction shots alone. They could have cleaned it up a bit to make it short. Like, that's so condescending and pedantic. Like, this is a very good movie.
Why is it being shorter a good thing? It's a very good movie. I enjoyed watching all of it. Even when I thought Marilyn was boring, I enjoyed watching Emma Stone going through her thoughts about her sexuality.
I just felt like it could have picked up the pace.
I think maybe the problem is that we've been watching too many good movies lately. I need to throw some stinkers in here for you to properly appreciate this. I think I need to find another Tennessee Johnson or another The Conqueror. Didn't mind the extra time that it went past 2 hours, where I could even pick up on anything that you'd call being slower. I just enjoyed having a little more time to sit in the scene and watch the actors reacting as their characters to things that you're calling like too much time on the hot take, I guess.
Anyway. So back to this. Bobby gets busted for gambling because Jack drops off the Rolls Royce.
It has a TV in it, and his little son thinks it's so cool. And we do see some scenes in here of Bobby trying to parent, where he and little Bobby are jumping around over all of the furniture, and they knock a lamp off, and I can just hear like any mother saying, of course you tell your kids not to climb on the furniture because they will fall off and hurt themselves and knock things down. And he's being cool, Dad. I feel like this man was never mature enough to have children, including the much older son from an earlier marriage, who seems like he has adjusted to an entire lifetime of of knowing to be disappointed with Dad. And we also meet Margaret Court, the arm, and her husband. And I do have to give Margaret Court's husband some credit for coming along on the tour with her, but she is not likable.
She's a bad person, and she gets worse in life. She's pretty judgmental, and she is picking up what Billie Jean and Marilyn are putting down.
All the single ladies and the ladies who I guess have husbands or boyfriends who are not with them are all in this team thing together, where it shows them rolling out the court, it shows them selling tickets, and it shows them all pitching in together to build something. And Margaret is just there to play tennis and make some money. And she seems like a real bummer to have on tour. I guess it's useful to them to have her name as the arm. She seems like the least fun person to have there, and she just isn't in with the camaraderie of the group. She just hangs out in her hotel room with her husband and her baby doing arm curls.
Billie Jean goes out with Marilyn to a bar, and oh boy, is she playing with fire right now.
So they play the song Crimson and Clover, which is a song that gets played a lot in movies, and I don't want to add a music category, but there's a lot of cases in this movie of them using songs that get used over and over and over again in movies that are supposed to tell you to feel a certain way. And I don't mind them because, as it happens, they're songs that I like and play frequently. I love the song Crimson and Clover. It makes me feel good every time I hear it, but it gets played a lot in the movies. And Billie Jean and Marilyn hook up, and again, I am in awe of old-time gaydar. I don't understand how this works. I don't understand how anyone ever intuits that anyone else is attracted to them. So as Billie Jean is hooking up with Marilyn on their first night together, Bobby Riggs calls her in the middle of the night to challenge her to the battle of the sexes. Marilyn is like, who was that? She's just like, some hustler.
Yeah.
No way could this happen where you can get a major celebrity athlete out on tour on the phone today by calling every hotel in the town that they're in. That is just crazy, the idea that he could get to her by calling every hotel in San Diego. It was a lot easier to stalk people then, even without the internet. How many hotels did he call in San Diego before he got to her?
There's not an insignificant number of hotels in San Diego. It is a destination.
Since they're staying at a basic motel. He probably started at the top and worked his way down.
Yeah.
He's probably called
he could have been calling people all night.
I think he's probably called at least 20 hotels. And then we get to one of my favorite scenes, which is that Bobby is obnoxious at a Gamblers Anonymous meeting. This was one of my favorite lines in the whole movie, and I wrote it down, and I'm going to repeat it when we get to choice dialogue, but I'm just going to say it now. You folks aren't here because you're gamblers. You folks are here because you are terrible gamblers. And just the way he delivers it and the way he throws down it's like, oh my gosh, he is messing with people. And he's doing it thoughtlessly.
I would say that the Bobby Riggs we meet in this movie is not a good candidate for a 12-step program.
No.
He is not interested in quitting.
He just won a Rolls Royce that he didn't even need. Jack has a gambling problem.
He is very clearly addicted to the feelings that he gets when he gambles.
They should kick him out of this Gamblers Anonymous meeting because he is ringing the bell on what's going to mess up all the people in the room who are terrible gamblers. And it's funny. I hate so many things about this character in the same way that Billie Jean does, where he just gets under my skin and but I do love watching him hustle. Because he just has so much zest to how he does it and so much energy about it and so much belief in himself where he's like, you've got to have an edge, you've got to have an angle. And you can also see how that's one of the things that Priscilla loves about him, where she says, you can just light up the room, but how that also plays into why she can't handle being with him anymore.
Yeah, and I think, too, we were talking about the likability of Steve Carrell, and I feel like Bobby Riggs, we have footage on him. I don't feel like we have the same kind of information on him that we have on Billie Jean King, and I do feel like Carrell really created and filled out a lot of this character. This was a really great scene for him, too.
The real Bobby Riggs, his big year was 1939, and what would have been his prime years were, cut out by World War II.
Yeah.
One little touch that I love here is that when he drives up in the Rolls Royce that has a TV in it, and he calls up and he's like, honey, can you at least throw me out a clean undershirt or something? A beat goes by and then you see her throwing clothes out the window. And one little thing that I love here is that when Priscilla throws a change of clothes out the window to Bobby and he takes them back to the Rolls Royce, you see a little black ball that is probably a neatly folded pair of socks left behind on the driveway as he scoops up his clothes on his way back to the car. Later we see him in therapy, and I love it that he's using his therapy session to play cards with the shrink, and that when they're talking to each other and the shrink is saying like, yeah, you're an alpha male, she's an alpha female. And then you realize that the woman they're talking about is Billie Jean King, not his estranged wife, Priscilla.
Yeah. I loved him talking in therapy about her. So anyway, Vanilla Pudding.
Can we just call Marilyn Vanilla Pudding?
Yeah. So Vanilla Pudding decides to go on the road with them. Like, she just drops everything to go on the road with them and be their hairstylist. She doesn't have to call anyone, just gets in the car and goes, which is wild, and also something that you could do in the 70s, I think. And the arm is in her car with her husband, and she's a lesbian, and it's bad to her husband. And IRL, Margaret Court, was actually worse than she is portrayed in the film. After she retired from tennis, became an anti-gay activist in Australia, vocally opposing same-sex marriage. And just like things I will never, ever understand is like why this shit matters so much to people who have nothing to do with it.
There's just the way that she says this thing like about licentiousness, sin, with her Australian accent, that I hate her so much in this moment. And I'm looking at her and I'm thinking, I hope you never had an orgasm in your life, lady.
Why does anybody care what anybody else does?
But if you want to hear something radical here, Billie Jean King brought Dr. Renee Richards with her on the tour in the 1970s, on the women's tour. And Billie Jean King said that, yeah, some of the women made a fuss, but they were quickly all friends soon. And she did that 50 years ago, and today there'd be hell to pay. I first learned about Renee Richardson from reading my older brother's Mad magazine collections when I was in like single digits. I also first learned about Billie Jean King from reading my parents' Doonesbury collections, because there's a series from the early 70s where all of the little girls at a nursery school want to be Billie Jean King when they grow up.
Renee Richards was an American ophthalmologist and a former tennis player who competed on the professional circuit in the 1970s. And she became widely known following male to female medical affirmation and fought to compete in the 1976 women's US Open. She was among the first professional athletes to transition, and she became a spokesperson for transgender people in sports. And she became a coach and coached Martina Navratilova to 2 Wimbledon titles.
Neat. Also, other fun facts that I picked up. Billie Jean's life partner, Ilana Klaas, has played Renee Richards both before and after the transition. And when Renee Richards transitioned and she was playing in California, Bobby Riggs actually recognized her despite it, because her serve was the same and he could tell her by her serve that it was still the same person, which says that Bobby Riggs isn't a total clown. If he could... He's a very, very skilled athlete.
Yeah. He's not a clown. One thing I did really like in the relationship with Marilyn and Billie Jean is that there is just a plethora of enthusiastic consent happening in their relationship.
I don't think we appreciate that when we see it. Like, either people don't bother to show it. There has been a lot of semi-consensual sex filmed in the long, long decades of Hollywood. And so they're bringing Marilyn on the tour. They make up a story about her being the hairdresser, because everyone wants a hairdresser on the tour. Something I didn't get when Gladys is like, can you do anything with this? Because Sarah Silverman has never had a bad hair day. She's like the girl at Hebrew school or the cousin who always looks perfect because they have the good hair that is either just straight to slightly wavy or will get that way with like lackadaisically aiming a blow dryer at it, whereas my hair takes a couple hours to get straight. And she seems like that perfect cousin, but then she wears Converse All-Stars, not the little Tiffany Silver bean, and she opens her mouth and filth pours out. So I love her.
Do we spend enough time talking about how beautiful she is?
No, and it's also she has not aged a day in like 30 years.
No, just I was thinking about that watching her in this. That she's made a very great transition to actor. She's really good in this. I don't know if you've ever seen the Sarah Polley movie, Take This Waltz. She's amazing in that. This is also, I would say, very aligned with that stereotype of the thing that a lesbian brings on her second date is a U-Haul. Like, Marilyn is immediately all in here. So then Larry King shows up to see Billie Jean on the tour. He catches the vibes really fast and he has a pretty sophisticated response to that, especially for the time. He knows what Marilyn is there for and what she wants. And he has a conversation with her about that, and also immediately tells Billie Jean, I'm going to get a different room. It's a really interesting response that he has, where it seems like he's been catching the vibe of this over time, but it's a compassionate response for a husband who is probably also surprised and hurt.
So I think in real life, Larry and Billie Jean King, her birth name was Billie Jean Moffat. They met very young. They were, I think, in college. They were barely out of their teens. And it wasn't at all unusual for people to marry so young then. And I'm like, how? But I think that like 50 or 60 years ago, it's weird. Getting married was seen as like part of setting up a life, whereas now it's seen as like the penultimate step before children when you have every single other thing perfectly in place. People just expected less when they got married at like 20 or 21. I think she had made out with a girl once before she met him.
So even though Billie Jean rejected Bobby Riggs's offer, Margaret takes him up on it.
Yeah. I hate Margaret's smugness here. She is an incredible athlete if you read the record on her, but on the one hand, she's just there to play tennis. On the other hand, it's just tennis. So she doesn't see what it means symbolically, and she probably doesn't care. And you see Bobby selling her on it. I want to give her that it's probably hard to have a baby on the tour like that. But I don't. So she thought it was just a game. So they show them all running in and putting coins into TVs because nobody has a mobile phone yet. In real life, they couldn't get the Mother's Day Massacre on a TV, and they had to listen on Rosie's portable radio. I also really like the actress who plays Rosie Casals in this. All of the actresses playing individual members of the tour did a good job differentiating themselves while not taking space away from the main story.
It's Natalie Morales. She's wonderful. This match is ugly. He beat her in under an hour, which is not the standard length of a tennis match. Usually they're at least double that, I believe. He wins, and he is back with his wife, and they decide they're going to get a divorce. It's a very mature conversation. He's talking to her about how great this match was and how he could get $1 million to play Chris Evert. And I'm like, are you going to play against women for the rest of your life, you circus freak? Like, that's what you're doing? She's done for now. IRL, Bobby got married to Priscilla in 1952. They divorced in 1971. And then they remarried in 1991 and stayed together for the rest of their lives.
He's trying to sell her on seeing it his way, and he fails.
She's not going for it. And so Billie Jean decides that she is going to go up against Bobby to try and redeem this situation and bring it back to a place where it's a serious competition and proving the goodness of women's tennis. So she decides that it's on, but she has a couple of ground rules. She calls up Larry King and she's like, make the deal, but like we have to have our terms, and that's the way it has to be in terms of, the commentator, in terms of like who's going to be the referee, where it's going to be played, all of that, which is smart because she very savvily gets that she needs to manage the narrative of this match, and she goes to town working her ass off to prepare for this match.
Yes, and you see both of them in the training. Bobby has his older son working with him, but you see Billie Jean like training on the court, and you also see Bobby doing a bunch of stunts, like running around dressed as Little Bo Peep with sheep, and doing a naked shot where you see his extreme sock tan.
It's a real picture, folks.
Yeah.
He's very cocky. But also like he backs it up.
Our old nemesis Jack shows up here.
I feel like obviously Bobby Riggs was sexist. Bobby Riggs is sexist in the same way that every man was sexist in 1973. And fortunately, that's all over and no men are sexist anymore. And I think like he's sexist the same way Atticus Finch was racist, Like obviously Atticus Finch was racist. He was a lawyer in the South in the 30s. Everyone got all shocked about that when that happened. But, it's about what you do with that information. And Jack is a true believer in what he's saying, but I don't think Bobby is. It's real disorienting to see Bill Pullman playing a bad guy.
Yeah. It's also disorienting to see him older, because in my head, he's permanently 40.
Jack wants to be the commentator for this game, to be providing the color commentary. It's a match. It's not a game. So she's like hard pass, and he tries to pull his crap again with her, like pushing her and threatening her. And she's like, no, you're not doing this. And they get the far less sexist in comparison Howard Cosell to commentate, which I was like, I guess that'll do. One thing that's really interesting too throughout this movie, and you hear it from all of the commentators, is that they call these women Mrs. Like Billie Jean is Mrs. King. All these women, despite their achievements, still belong to someone. So the match comes up. They're going to play at the Astro Stadium in Houston. This is televised on ABC primetime. It's a huge deal. And, and there is like a little bit of theatrics at the beginning of it. Like they're both brought in on like litters.
Yeah, well, she's brought in on a throne. He's carried in on a litter wearing his sugar daddy thing that he's been paid to wear by these younger cheerleader-looking women. And she hands him an adorable baby pig with a little bow around its neck. And he, to his credit, he holds the baby pig like a man who actually held his children.
I stand by my belief that he was not 100% in. And completely like knew his part in this. And as soon as I typed the phrase, wow, tennis isn't really fun to watch in a movie, all of a sudden this became riveting to watch them play tennis.
Yeah, I almost figured out the game. I think the point is to hit the ball back and forth until they're not able to hit it back to you for some reason, and then they kind of lose something.
Yes.
I should have read about this, but I just get bored when I read the rules for sports.
You want them to not hit the ball back to you.
So can't you just why don't they go crazy with it more? Or is the point that you have to hit it over the net or you lose?
You have to hit it over the net, and you have to hit it within the boundaries of, if you're looking at the tennis court, there's two alleys on the side of the two boxes.
Mm-hmm.
You have to hit it within those boxes. So you have a relatively contained area. Like when you're playing, you're running all over the place like a madman. But you have to hit it within a relatively contained area. You have to keep it in bounds, which is why they can't go completely bananas. You want to hit it someplace where they won't be able to make contact with the ball. It can bounce once or it can bounce nonce.
Okay.
But if it bounces twice, then you lose the point.
It sounds like there has to be some kind of sincere effort within wanting them to not hit the ball, to have the pretense of wanting them to hit the ball.
Yes. You don't want them to hit the ball back to you.
Okay.
Oh boy. This is a good conversation.
Well, in between here, there is a cameo for Fred Armisen as some kind of snake oil salesman / vitamin guy who is now at Bobby's side giving him vitamins, because Bobby is not actually training. He's like flush with having won the Mother's Day massacre. And Billie Jean gets the flu for a bit, but also I noted that like when Jack stalks off, it isn't, I like that it reflected that he makes some televised speech about women letting their emotions get in the way of them. And like, he won't give her the win.
Yeah.
Which is how real life bad guys behave. They'll never give you the ending that you want where they fall down on their knees before you and say, you were right.
Yeah, they're not going to give them that.
So let's talk about this match. I don't know how much they could recreate. Like, one of the things I thought they did well here was, I hadn't mentioned this before, when there's something where you really can't show someone doing it with the same skill, so you employ the camera. I don't think they can get these two actors to do a perfect imitation of that game. They can get them to look like them, and the rest comes down to the camera. The other place where I see this is when Marilyn is cutting hair, because IRL, you can't have the actor actually cut the hair unless they were a real hairdresser. And I have hung out with hairdressers while watching movies in which people get a haircut where they'll say, no, in real life there'd be little snippets falling all over the place. It'd be a big mess, and she has no professional skills, and she's using the wrong scissors, and they're just like sitting there in their dresses watching TV. Like, no, this would be a mess. And so it's like in the way they crop the kid, you can tell she's like trimming from a wig where Emma Stone's face is just out of camera.
Yes. Yes, I noticed it too, but I think that they did a really good job with the doubles.
Yeah, well, has anyone ever made a Manson Murders movie where you see Jay Seberg cutting hair?
I don't think we saw him cutting hair in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Shampoo is kind of supposed to sort of be about Jay Seberg.
But do you see Warren Beatty cut hair in that, or are they?
Yes, you do see him cutting. I haven't seen that movie in forever, but you see him doing Julie Christie's hair.
But she starts to, they're playing, and she has taken this seriously the whole time, and he has to leave the jacket on longer because he made some money from it. Then he has to take the jacket off, and you can see him starting to fade and lose his nerve.
Yes. And she's killing it. She's doing a really good job.
And I wanted to note here that the dress that she wore is now in the Smithsonian, and it was in the Smithsonian when I went there as a kid.
Yes. It's and the facsimile that they make is really, really accurate. It's really great to see her win. Like you feel it's really earned. And it's exciting to watch her win.
I love Rosie holding her own with Howard Cosell. And you see Elizabeth Shue show up at the back for, I guess, like moral support.
I'm going to remarry you in 20 years. Don't worry about it, guy.
Yeah, and I'll see Margaret watching with her husband. I wish this could have changed her, but they never give you that.
I wish it just didn't matter to her that she was just watching someone who she was a compatriot with, and had shared so many experiences with, like, and watching them and being proud of what they accomplished. But no, I think like it's important to talk about some of the potentially bummer truths behind the match. They are all allegations and from dubious sources, but they make for interesting stories. There is an ESPN show called Outside the Lines, and they made an allegation that Bobby Riggs took advantage of the overwhelming odds against King and threw the match to get his debts to the mob erased. That episode featured a man who had been silent for 40 years for reasons of self-protection, who claimed that he had worked at a country club, and there heard several members of the mafia talking about Riggs throwing the match in exchange for canceling his gambling debt to the mob. So first of all, the mafia doesn't exist, as we know, but also the program also stated that Riggs' close friend and estate executor Lorne Cool vehemently denied Riggs was ever in debt to the mob or received a payoff from them. I also think it's worth pointing out here again, we know that Bobby was a very facile gambler.
Billie Jean had this to say. Right away, a few of the old male pros started griping that Bobby must have thrown the match on purpose. I heard that was a hot topic at the Los Angeles Tennis Club, too, where Jack Kramer, Pancho Gonzalez, and a bunch of other male players had watched the telecast. Some of them couldn't believe that Bobby had lost to a woman. But furthermore, more importantly, Arthur Ashe said that he won $80 on a bet betting on Billie Jean, and she notes, 40 years later, ESPN broadcast a bogus story, reviving the tanking question and suggesting that Bobby lost to pay off mafia gambling debts. The charge never made sense, and Bobby always denied it. First of all, he bet heavily on himself for the match. Dick's check was just one of many Bobby had to pay out. Second, Bobby's coach, Lorne, who knew him better than anyone, says the allegation that Bobby tanked is preposterous because Bobby had plenty of money and he was never in debt to any mobsters. Lorne insisted that Bobby's greatest undoing was his ego. Bobby admitted that too. Before the match, he told New York Magazine, "I'm overconfident and undertrained. I'm completely ridiculous." Most important, Bobby thought that he had a lucrative franchise going if he beat me. It wasn't widely known, but Jerry Parenchio was already angling to put together an astonishing $1 million winner-take-all match between Bobby and Chrissy. And there was talk that perhaps Bobby would play Rosie after that. That alone should have killed any talk of a fixed match. Years later, Bobby even took a lie detector test on the attorney F. Lee Bailey's talk show, hoping to prove once and for all that our match was legitimate. In 1990, he told World Tennis Magazine, "I didn't let Billie Jean win. I bet on that match, and I bet on Bobby Riggs, and I lost." It was a bitter, bitter defeat. Throwing the match couldn't be further from the truth. Losing to her was the most disappointing, disheartening experience of my life. Besides, a pro tennis player knows when a fellow player tanks. I knew this wasn't a tank. Bobby wanted to beat me. He just couldn't. She was too good. She was never extended, he said. Classy in defeat. And finally, after those multiple points from Ms. Billie Jean King herself, who are you going to trust? Billie Jean King or some mafia guy?
I mean, he's not even a mafia guy. He's someone who overheard a conversation between the supposed mafia, which again, we all know doesn't exist, in a locker room at a country club 40 years ago and sat on it for 40 years. That, to me, is never credible. Also, like, while I firmly believe that if you are taking a lie detector test on national television, you need to take a look at your life choices and how you got there and have a think on it. However, I don't, yeah, like, I think like it sounds like it's all just like sour grapes trying to justify how a woman could possibly have beaten a man in this match. So I just found this story. In 2022, Serena Williams humiliated 5 men at the same time as they tried together to score a single point on her. There are differences in physicality, of course, but I do think that it's completely feasible that a 29-year-old woman in the prime of her life and the best at the game in the moment could beat a very strong but 55-year-old in 70s time man, which means he's like 80 in current age because of the way people ran their bodies out.
So you don't think Fred Armisen's vitamins are helping him?
You're pissing all of that out if you're able to piss after you take that many vitamins.
The sense that this was a Dr. Feelgood. Has anyone ever made a movie about that guy? They must have.
No, and it could be an interesting story.
I don't know. Like, it's a succession of famous faces and syringes.
So she wins. Sexism as we know it is dead.
Wow, how nice to be living in a world where Billie Jean King ended sexism as we knew it.
Not that this mafia story isn't completely sexist. And then Billie Jean goes into the locker room to cry afterwards. She's very emotional. She's having a moment.
We think she's going to hug Marilyn on her way to the Frank Gifford interview, but she goes into the locker room to cry instead.
Yeah. I, at this point, was like, so I don't know if you remember 2020 when we were all wearing masks, but like trying to keep your glasses from fogging in 30 seconds was impossible. How on earth did she wear those glasses, sweating as she would have playing a tennis match? Those glasses never get foggy.
It's not just that she doesn't have a mask on.
Oh, I know, but just thinking about that little burst of that level of condensation caused your glasses to fog up like inconsolably.
I think that's just something where they took poetic license because nobody wants to see that.
And as she's crying in the locker room, she's trying to pull herself together, and Alan Cumming comes in,
and Alan Cumming makes her one of those wise GBF speeches.
Yes, but I'll allow it from Alan Cumming because I will allow all the things from Alan Cumming. And I think this was an important message to put in here. And I wrote down the line, times change. You should know you just changed it.
And see, this to me smacks of It Gets Better. This was written before we had that outcome from the 2016 election.
For sure.
I feel like in the 20-teens, we were living with this assurance that things were slowly on this arc and we weren't going to feel pain from it.
Yeah, this world will break your heart.
It does. It makes me so happy that even the sugar daddy girls are applauding for Billie Jean as she comes out of the locker room.
Yeah. And everyone is applauding for her. And I agree that the speech is a little, it gets better, but also time does march forward. It just sometimes steps back.
Bobby does. I find Bobby telling her, like, I underestimated you, and I find that more believable than the It Gets Better speech.
You know what else I loved too was the way he like hopped over the net to be the first person to congratulate her on winning. The sportsmanship of that was touching to me, and was when I finally sealed my thought process around like he knew what he was doing.
Yes, and he's a good sport, she's a good sport. Jack is a bad sport.
Yeah. And someday there will be no more Jacks.
Really?
I don't know when that day will be, but someday we won't have them anymore.
I don't believe you anymore.
I'm not saying that we'll be here for it. I am saying, though, that someday we won't have them anymore.
Because there are no people left because we all nuked ourselves and there are no more humans and ergo no more Jacks.
No, someday that line of thinking will be kicked to the curb, I believe if a person like Billie Jean King can exist, You know, like there's other good people out there who will be willing to fight the good fight and to make the changes. I have to have hope because I don't like the alternative.
Well, another note about how this romance winds up. Marilyn wound up launching a huge palimony suit against Billie Jean years later.
I'd like to interject here that there's a reason why we've been shitting all over Marilyn throughout this episode, and you're about to understand why.
Yeah.
The truth behind this relationship is pretty brutal. So Billie Jean remained married to Larry during this affair. And when the affair ended, Marilyn was asked to leave the house where she had lived rent-free with Billie Jean. She tried to extort Billie Jean King by threatening to release letters that would reveal their secret relationship. When that failed, Marilyn sued Billie Jean King in 1981 for half her income and the house, invoking palimony law. Although Marilyn lost that lawsuit, this forced coming out cost Billie Jean King millions in endorsements. That was kind of a shitty thing to do.
Yeah, that was. There is a great episode of the Trashy Divorces podcast about Billie Jean and Larry King's divorce, where they basically conclude, to paraphrase, this was not a trashy divorce. This is one of the classiest divorces we've ever talked about. The problem here was Marilyn. Marilyn is trash.
You don't necessarily know the consequences of your actions when you're pissed off and you make a choice like this to sue someone in this way, but forcing her out of the closet in this way at this time was cruel and not the kind of thing you would do to someone if you cared about them and loved them.
Marilyn Barnett became paralyzed from the waist down after a suicide attempt. So she's not a well person. She is not handling the disappointment of a relationship ending in a healthy manner. But beyond that, there are reasons why we don't like Marilyn.
The ultimate net gain of Billie Jean King's life and quality of life and what she did and who she helped and how she helped them, that was obviously positively impacted by this terrible thing that happened to her, but it shouldn't have happened.
No, and also Larry King remarried, and Billie Jean and her, I don't know if she says wife or life partner, but they are godparents to Larry's children with his subsequent wife. So
I love this so much.
Yes.
Like, I love this so much. I love how much respect they had for each other.
Yeah. And then also, you had another lovely note of trivia.
After this match, Billie Jean King and Bobby Riggs actually became very close friends. They kept in touch until he died in October of 1995. He didn't want to see people at the end of his life because he was very frail and he didn't want them to see him that way, but they would speak, and they spoke the day before Riggs died, and they said, I love you to each other at the end of that call.
Oh.
As I'm sure they did many times.
And they show photos of the IRL moments over the closing credits, and I am impressed with how close they got.
Yeah, they really captured the look and feel and substance of the period.
I thought the baby pig they used in the movie was cuter, but I'm okay with it.
Yeah. That's your face 2.0 right there.
Yeah. So I believe we have some awards talk this week, Sarah.
I would make an argument that Emma Stone, this performance to me was the most accomplished of her career up until this point. She had won the Oscar the year before for La La Land, which is a movie I can't roll my eyes hard enough at. It's kind of a bummer that she won for that, because I think that this would have been a much more interesting movie for her to be nominated for. But nevertheless, this was the year of Call Me by Your Name. So it was a big year for that. I would also mention that Emma Stone not getting nominated is actually second to the snubbing of My Boyfriend Michael Stuhlbarg. He should have been nominated for Best Supporting Actor for Call Me by Your Name, but was not, and that's a goddamn shame. Awards and honorifics they did receive. Emma Stone and Steve Carrell received Golden Globe nominations for Best Actor and Actress, Motion Picture Musical Comedy. They both received Critics' Choice Award nominations, and Carrell received a nomination for Outstanding Performance by a Male Actor in a Supporting Role at the Screen Actors Guild Awards, which is an interesting choice because I didn't feel like he was a supporting character in this movie, but, you know, everybody do you, and this is all political anyway. So that is my awards talk for this week. Did you have any choice dialogue that you would like to share?
I wrote down 6 pieces of dialogue, and there have been more quotable movies that we've done. I guess this was just a week where I was better about watching one screen with another screen open to take notes. So the dialogue I wrote down includes, we sell the same amount of tickets. Also, what are your grand slams without the greatest women players in the world? They're not so grand. And you do the tennis, I'll do the smoking. Plus, not even a fresh pair of underpants? Toothbrush? And I'll admit, a big favorite. You folks aren't here because you're gamblers. You folks are here because you are terrible gamblers. And finally, at last, finally, one of my girls smokes.
Oh, you were fun. No, I agree with all of yours. And
so, Sarah, can you please give our listeners a quick refresher about how we score movies?
Absolutely. We rate movies on a 1 to 10 scale across 10 areas that we find to be subjectively and or objectively important to most films, but specially tailored to the issues specific to biopics. If you want more details on how we score movies, please scroll down our webpage at biopicapodcaststory.podbean.com. You'll also find a record of our scores for past episodes. And with that out of the way, let's score this thing.
So for outward appearances, makeup, and hair, I gave it a 9.5. For acting and casting, do they capture the spirit of the people they are playing? Beyond that, is the acting good? I gave a 9.5. The 0.5 off is for Riseborough. For passage of time, I gave it an 8. For costuming, I gave a 9. For quality of the script, I gave a 9. For accuracy, I gave a 4. For storytelling, I gave a 6. For production value, I gave a 9.5. For production direction decision making, I gave 8.5. And for do we care, I gave it a 9.
Outward appearances, I gave it a 9. Mm-hmm. Acting and casting, I gave it a 9. Passage of time, I gave it a 5. Costuming, gave it a 9. Quality of the script, 7. Accuracy, 5. Storytelling, 5. Production value, 7. Production direction decision making, 7. Do we care, 8.
I'm doing my tally. 8.2. What did you get?
7.
Battle of the Sexes. I am so sorry. You did not earn second opinion. Your total average score came to 7.6, which still makes you a perfectly delightful way to spend an evening.
Yeah. I recommend this movie.
It's enjoyed a really
cool story. And the performances are delightful, and Steve Carrell is a very watchable actor. Emma Stone is wonderful. It's good times.
So any other stuff that you think our listeners should watch instead, Sarah?
Not instead. In addition, I do like shout out to Trashy Divorces, the podcast. That podcast is amazing. And for Virginia Slims,
their ads, not the cigarette.
Yeah.
But
don't
their
smoke.
ads don't smoke, people, but do look up the old Virginia Slims ads from the 80s because they were a lot of fun. Cancer is not fun. I'd also recommend Monday Night Mayhem if you want a bigger look into Howard Cosell. And also, Sarah Silverman was recently in a documentary called Jews Don't Count by David Baddiel. Watch her scenes from that. There's some other people in it that I'm not too crazy about.
I mentioned Take This Waltz earlier, that it's a lovely film. It's very different from this, but Sarah Polley is an outstanding filmmaker, and it's a really, really wonderful performance from Sarah Silverman. And yeah, and don't start smoking. I can't overstate this. You will never find anything that brings you that level of joy after you quit.
I still like hold my hand like this, like a pretend cigarette, just to give myself something to do with my hands while I'm talking. I'll still move them around like there's a cigarette there.
I will catch myself smoking a pen every once in a while.
There was that line from David Sedaris about how he got rid of all of the nervous tics he had as a kid by taking up smoking, and he was like, wonderful, wonderful cigarettes that give me something to do with my hands. Don't smoke, kids. Retractions, apologies, and listener mailbag.
Before we go, we have to apologize for something we said in a previous episode that turned out to be misinformation, and we are sorry for this.
We were wrong. Sometimes we're wrong.
Rena, what were we wrong about?
Sarah, we were wrong about two things in the 24-hour Party People episode with Maggie Sirota. I said Joseph Conrad when I meant to name Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell wrote this book about the hero's journey that is responsible for many, many formulaic Hollywood scripts. Joseph Conrad wrote The Heart of Darkness, later the inspiration
about the hero's journey.
It's when the hero's journey goes a bit awry. I think I last read it in high school, I remember, and that is where the horror comes from. It's an inspiration for Apocalypse Now, and I messed that up because I'm not as smart as I wish I was, and I'm sorry. Also, when we spoke about the Ryder brothers, Sean and Paul Ryder of the Happy Mondays, and how the three of us all felt that they ought to be under a conservatorship, I still agree with Maggie when she listed people that she thought would be good to give this conservatorship to, and she mentioned a professional wrestler or a drill sergeant or just a guy who's really good with a cattle prod. But we were referring to both Ryder brothers as if they were both still alive. I subsequently found out that Paul Ryder has died and was already dead for, I think, a couple years as of a little over a week ago when we taped the episode. But I was referring to him like he was still alive. So
I wouldn't trust that corpse.
No, that corpse needs a conservator with a cattle prod.
Yeah, I think that corpse could find a way to be problematic.
That corpse is still out there poisoning pigeons.
Little bit of house business here. Our podcast baby has matured into a toddler, and we have launched a Patreon, simply an effort to defray some of the costs associated with bringing our show to you. Platform hosting costs, recording costs, and research costs, and we have to occasionally order a book off the internet. We also sometimes pay for movie rentals. We are offering shout outs and access to our awful first 3 episodes to anyone who chips in. There will be more gifts coming. And with that, we'd love to thank Gates, who signed up already. Thank you,
Gates.
And if you liked our show, please leave us a 5-star rating and subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And tell a friend, or better yet, plural friends, and share us on social media. We hear it helps. You can follow us on Threads, Blue Sky, and Instagram, where we have visual aids from our episodes. Our Instagram handle is @Biopic a Podcast Story. So do check us out there, and we'll link to that in the show notes as well. Please also check out our webpage at biopicapodcaststory.podbean.com to see the official episode ratings for all of the movies that we've done so far. And if you would like to get in touch, you can email us at biopiclistenermailbag@gmail.com.
Tune in next week when we'll be talking about I Shot Andy Warhol.
Is a movie with the sexiest Andy Warhol, Jared Harris.
Yes, looking forward to Jared Harris, who, as you pointed out last week, no relation to Sean Harris.
Also gorgeous.
Yes.
But yes, Jared Harris is Andy Warhol. Scum Manifesto. I'm here for it. Also a good soundtrack on this movie.
Yeah, I Shot Andy Warhol does have a very good soundtrack, although Lou Reed would not let them use any of his music from the Velvet Underground or refer to them directly, I think, because he was like, Valerie Solanas shot my friend, you're not using my music, which I'm in sympathy with. That's entirely his right.
Also, previous episode cameo, Jewel Kilcher does the cover of Donovan's Sunshine Superman on the soundtrack, which less said the better. But in general, the soundtrack is excellent.
Yes, and we will have one of our A Bouquet of Caveats units in that film around some issues with the casting that were considered progressive in the 90s and not so much anymore.
Yes, looking forward to that fresh bouquet of caveats.
Yes. So with that, Sarah, good night to the earnest and the cynical.
Night, Rena.
Good night, Sarah.